This is Agent Carter on Defenders TV Podcast, Season 1, Episode 3, Time and Tide. Welcome back to Defenders TV Podcast. This is Agent Carter, Season 1, Episode 3, Time and Tide on Defenders TV Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hi, I'm one of your other hosts, John.
Yeah, delighted to be back this week for the podcast. Really good and really enjoyable watching Agent Carter.
Absolutely. On a Sunday here in Ireland and the UK on Fox UK.
Yeah. I want to kick off this podcast with a little bit of feedback we got in since the last episode aired from Eric Pearson. You may remember I mentioned last week that Eric Pearson was the writer for episode 2 of Agent Carter and of the one-shots for the Marvel movies. Eric got in contact with us on Twitter, which was really nice of him. He said to the gentlemen of Defenders Cast, thank you sincerely. Loved the podcast. We're busy making season 2 for you and for all. Really nice of you, Eric. He also says your favourite scene from episode 2 was also the scene I was most proud of, so thanks again. That was the scene between Peggy and Jarvis, which we loved so much, really enjoyed.
Absolutely, and I think there may be another scene like that in this episode that caught our eye. Definitely.
I think there might be. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can follow us at DefendersCast. You can also send feedback in, and please do, for Agent Carter for our coverage for the next 5 episodes. You can send us feedback at feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com. That's feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com.
And remember, you can find our podcast on www.defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes. Subscribe there and get our feed directly into your iTunes, or again any other good podcast catcher such as Stitcher or Player FM. Just search Defenders TV Podcasts.
Yep, pretty much out there everywhere. You can also join us on Facebook. Obviously, just search Defenders TV Podcast. I think that's enough of the links for now. I think we're going to crack into this week's episode. This episode, Time and Tide, was written by Andy Bushell. She's well known for her work on Alias and The Mentalist. She's also a co-executive producer on Agent Carter. And it was directed by Scott Winant, who is very well known right back to the days of 30-something and one of my favourite shows of all time, My So-Called Life, which brought Jared Leto to us and brought us...
Certainly did. Claire Danes.
Yeah.
Oh, the memories.
Oh, what a wonderful show.
The memories.
Brilliant to have Scott Winant on board for our wonderful Peggy Carter. John, do you want to let us know what we got in this week's episode?
As Peggy Carter acclimatises to life in the Griffith Hotel, a strict woman's-only hostel where men are not allowed above the first floor, and keeps up her pretense of working at the telephone company, Agent Carter begins to close in on Howard Stark's stolen technology. However, Peggy's covert mission increasingly looks like it could unravel, as Strategic Scientific Reserve SSR colleagues separately investigate the green-suited man's hotel room and a license plate discovered at the remains of the Roxxon oil refinery. The circle tightens further on Agent Carter when the SSR arrests Jarvis, who has been assisting Carter on suspicion of involvement in the Roxxon implosion. Their secret is in serious danger of being revealed until Peggy fakes incompetency in a calculated move that allows Jarvis to walk free, but in turn loses her the respect of her male colleagues. However, Carter and Jarvis immediately take up the trail of the missing weapons, leading them to a boat called Heartbreak, moored at New York's docks, where Brannis had stored all of Stark's technology. As Peggy dispatches a hired thug guarding the stash in an epic fight sequence, Jarvis anonymously tips off the SSR about the location of the weapons. Little do they know that they are being watched by a mysterious menace who clinically dispatches threats to their unknown agenda, causing distress and pain for the entire SSR.
Oh, yes. Nice synopsis, John.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
yes.
a really interesting...
A lot of anonymously almost going through my head. Yes.
Lots of anonymity, yes, definitely.
Yes, yes, but I think I managed to get it out on the first go.
Yeah, definitely. Well done. And a really good ending to this particular episode. Yeah, some nice moments, which I'm sure we'll get through in our top 5. Again, if this is your first time listening to us, or you've forgotten how we cover our shows, we cover them covering 5 points each that stood out to us about each episode. Some crossover usually comes about during it, but through those 5 points, we usually cover the full episode. John, do you want to give us your first point?
Certainly, and mine is the opening scene, actually, of the episode. It's the Romeo and Juliet gag at the start. It's really, really good. We've get that the Griffith Hotel is this kind of under lock and key woman's only hostel. It's run by a matron-like, sort of strict, sort of middle-aged lady who's absolutely immaculately dressed, perfectly posed, and so on, and repeatedly tells people, men are not allowed past the first floor. Mm-hmm. They're not to move from beyond the lobby. And of course, there's the scene where you actually think maybe it's some covert operation spying on Peggy's room, starts shimmying up the drain pipe. But instead, it's a starstruck lover called Jimmy who's shimmying up the drain pipe to see his beautiful Juliet, in this case called Molly, and is met with a gun in the face by Agent Carter, and just really, really good, as she says, next window over, move along, what are you doing here? And it's all preceded as well by the fact she pulls out the complete works of Shakespeare, and instead within the book is the Book of Symbols, as she tries to look for the heart and the snake or the squiggly line symbol that Leet Brannis had put into the dirt in the last episode. So it was a really, really good little gag. I must say I really enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty neat, pretty smart. Really liked it.
Yeah, definitely a bit more West Side Story probably than Romeo and Juliet with Jimmy and Molly rather than Romeo and Juliet, obviously, which I thought was a good little joke. Yeah, definitely the Lady Dowager of the Griffith is quite an interesting character. Love how she discusses, even Harry Houdini, who came here and could escape from any box known to man, any chains or handcuffs that were available to him, but there's one trick he couldn't pull off, which was to climb the stairs of the Griffith Hotel. Fantastic little moment, and again, a nice little setting of the time period, I suppose, and setting of the fact that this is an establishment that's been around for a long time, and has been serving this purpose for unmarried women for many years. And unfortunately leads to quite a sad moment when Molly gets kicked out. There's definitely a moment of, again, that period of time where, a young unmarried woman who's definitely in a relationship with Jimmy, but because it doesn't match the rules of the house, she's now lost her home because of that one night.
It's another one of those things that really talks and speaks of the social element of that time, which is really good. I mean, it would seem that it was probably easier for Romeo and Juliet in 15th century Italy to go shimmying up the ivy than it is for poor old Jimmy and Molly, despite warring factions. But really, really good, really nice little gag.
Yeah, and another little touch I really liked about the scene, as you see Jimmy at the opening of the episode, as the camera pans behind him, as you say, John, it looks like something out of a spy film. You think that he's coming to attack Peggy. He's looking at her window, mistakenly, as we find out later on. But later on in the episode, you do see the shady figure, or the anonymous figure that's standing watching over the Heartbreak boat, is standing in exactly the same position with very similar kind of lines and very similarly shot. I believe this is also how we got introduced to the man in the green suit, or the quiet man, in episode 1 of the show. Again, a shot from behind as he watches over Peggy Carter. So they're using this little gag, or using that premise, I suppose, to set up this little gag as well. A really good touch.
Yeah, definitely. Derek, what's your first point?
Loads to choose from in this episode. Yeah, really enjoyed it. My first point is going to be about Jarvis this week. One of the main characters, obviously, in the show, but a really big show for him. Big episode for him this week.
Yeah,
really.
Definitely.
Yeah, obviously being brought in and being interrogated by Jack Thompson, the special interrogator of the SSR, possibly going to get the stick or the carrot that was used in episode 2. I wonder, did they get a new stick after the last one broke? I'm not sure. They didn't use it on Jarvis this week, so potentially not. But I did love the whole idea of, that there is a dark secret in the past of Jarvis. And it shows off some really interesting connections here. So essentially, he gets threatened with a charge of treason, essentially. He'd been charged and the charges dropped in the past, and Thompson is using this idea that he was suspected of treason to try and get some information out about him and hopefully make him sing and hopefully get all the information about Howard Stark. But as the story is revealed throughout the episode, you essentially find out that the reason why Jarvis is or was charged for treason and then dropped was because he tried to release the love of his life from possibly a concentration camp during the war. You find out that she's Jewish, and that his head commander, I guess, lead commander,
general.
Thank you, that his general had some papers that could have released her. Any one of them, he took them, forged the signature, and got his lady wife Anna, who we still haven't seen, released from Germany. And essentially, it looks like Howard got the charges dropped, which would, I guess, show why Jarvis has such a connection with Howard Stark as well, Quite an interesting story, and there's some great interplay between Peggy as she tries to find out that piece of information. Should she trust Jarvis or not? She tends to be quite an intelligent woman. She doesn't want to be led down the garden path. She doesn't want to be dealing with someone that is possibly someone that is against society. So
yeah, and she kind of goes fishing for it as well. It's not like she probably wants to go fishing in a sewer, but she goes fishing for it. She kind of says, it's your business, I don't want to know. But she's kind of saying it to say, look, come on, tell me, because actually I do need to know. But she's saying it in a very polite, kind of reserved, held back kind of, I don't want to say British way, but I mean...
Go on, you're allowed.
But that's kind of, I think the insinuation is that trying to be kind of fairly... calm, polite, and so on. But then in the end, she just has to come out and say it and be quite direct and forthright and say, look, tell me, I need to know. And he then explains the reason for why Thompson is accusing him of treason. And of course, if mud sticks once, they're trying to go for the play of, well, we can say this, it's on your record, and we'll try and get you riled up.
Yep.
And they do get him riled up. I mean, I like the steel in Jarvis here. I mean, he's very cool, he's very calm, he's very kind of level-headed and very loyal whilst he's in this interview room. And of course, they're concerned that a bunch of Stark lawyers are going to come racing down. It's probably why they don't use the stick now. But it's a different kind of intimidation where essentially Thompson goes for the love of his life with this element of deportation of both him on the basis or suspicion of treason, but also that his wife will. And you see a real change in Jarvis, which I must say I really, really liked. As soon as he is threatened, but more importantly his wife, he just kind of glares at Thompson and says, leave my wife out of it. Real protective. And you find out why, because he's also protected her when they had first met and fallen in love from the Germans, from this same kind of threatening behaviour in a sense. Slightly different, obviously, but again, it's the threat to the love of his life, as he did there in Hungary at the outbreak of World War II, when he called in the favour of Howard Stark to get that treason ultimately dropped.
Yeah. And I suppose it makes a lot of sense for Peggy to be quite distrustful as well, because again, she's a career army person. She was taken out. She left the army obviously when the war ended and went to work in the SSR, but she is career army. She would be very distrustful of someone that gets a dishonorable discharge, which is what happened to Jarvis. He got the dishonorable discharge. So,
and he was caught in Whitehall as well, which is the big seat of essentially all the British government ministries. For anyone who is not from the UK, such as any of the Irish listeners, but also American listeners, Whitehall is where all the government departments are and ministries, and it's at the old site of a huge white, I think, royal banqueting hall or something like that.
Very interesting.
Something like that. It may even still exist, or I don't know, within the Foreign Office or something.
You've been away a while, so but thanks for
I can't remember.
I'm learning as well. Very good. John, what's your next point?
I'm sticking with the Jarvis theme. Again, it contrasts this point contrasts with the Steel, and I really like some of the quips and the sarcasm that Jarvis sort of displayed in this episode. I thought it was really, really, really great, and I think it's all as Susan and Thompson arrive at Stark's house to question him, and ultimately they arrest him there whilst Peggy's lurking in the background. But certainly, like when they put him into the back of the car that they've arrived in, he goes, "This will be novel. I haven't been in the back of a car for years." Like just making making the point that I'm normally up front driving Howard Stark around. I really liked that. And then also just to Peggy, he also comes in after she's said that she got an idea from my landlady about places being impenetrable, of which Peggy completely disagrees, and he goes, "Splendid. Now we can get an opinion from your butcher." Nice. Again, another really just like off the cuff quip, really. And again, to Susan Thompson, did you lose anything recently? Hinting at the bumper and the car plate, license plate that was found in the pile of rocks and rubble. He kind of goes, "I did lose a fountain pen on Fifth Avenue recently." It's all just really nice little off-the-cuff sort of quips and sarcasm, which I can imagine would rile up the SSR agents absolutely no end. But then as well, you get the reverse of that, and this is what makes, I think, Jarvis and Peggy just so good as well, is that he's talking about the break-in to Howard's vault when all these weapons were stolen. And of course, he talks about the tremendous thunderstorm that was occurring, which made it difficult to hear anything. But he goes, "I'm afraid the sultry combination of candlelight and rain puts me out like a baby." And like Peggy retorts back again, she quips back with, "You're quite the guard dog." So it's just that lovely back and forth between the two of quips and sarcasm and just the great humour that brings, and the lightness of touch to that relationship, which is really, really nice. And it really stood out to me in this episode. I really liked it. So that's definitely one of my points for this episode.
Yeah, we do love our Jarvis. We love a couple of Jarvisisms.
Yeah,
I think we'll call them.
the Jarvisisms. That's as bad as anonymously.
But yeah, I really like that stuff. That just does kind of lead in slightly to one of my points. Just trying to work it out. It looks like there's a scene that's in there that's either cut or maybe it just didn't pan out the way that the writers had intended it. Where the SSO arrive at the door, and Peggy hides behind the door while Jarvis answers the door. She leaves her bag at the top of the stairs on a little table, which is directly in Jack Thompson's eye line as Jarvis opens the door. Definitely think that was going to play out in some sense. Definitely think that there were going to be some point made about, is there a woman in the house? Is there someone behind Jarvis in the house that Thompson, being the investigator that he is, of course he'd take a quick look over the shoulder and see if he could see inside the house, I wonder if that was something that was written in, or I wonder if that was something that was intended to go down a different path and then it changed later on. It just stood out to me as being an interesting point. Yeah,
no, I spotted that as well. I did think that it was going to get caught and he was going to have to make up some excuse. Again, maybe that it was his wife's. And it didn't pan out. But yeah, no, I thought the same kind of thing. There's actually one thing as well that I wanted to say when you said that we hadn't seen Jarvis's wife. I actually think it's quite good that we don't see her, and it's kind of, to me, it reminds me of Charlie Brown's mum in off camera. It's always those great off camera characters that you may never see, but it influences everything that's on camera, in particular obviously with Jarvis and for Jarvis, but you never see them. I really like that kind of concept, which seems to be happening, because we heard her though in this episode.
That's right.
But we didn't see her.
Yeah, there've been a few shows that have done that in the past, aren't there? There's Cheers, where Norm's wife you never saw for the 8th series of the show. I think I don't actually watch it, but I think on How I Met Your Mother, you never see the mother, obviously, for the full show. There's The Big Bang Theory, where some of the mothers are around, but you've never actually met any of the characters. So it is quite a good trope to use.
Exactly.
But I think in a show that's about crime and investigation and possible threats around every corner, the one thing that always strikes to me is, who is Anna? Do we know Anna in a different form, possibly in the show? So it does intrigue me. Is there another character that's in there already that Jarvis hasn't met up with on the show, or Jarvis hasn't seen, but we've seen as the audience? So I'm intrigued to see, potentially there could be a character already there. Yeah, interesting. So John, back to you about your next point. Mine was just a bag that potentially had some significance and then didn't pan out.
I'm back to Jarvis and Peggy again, and it's
really is their show.
It is. It's really the exchange that they have on the Heartbreak, the ship that they come across, and where they find Howard Stark's weapons tech.
Mm-hmm.
And like, obviously, it's another point further down, but you know, Jarvis and Peggy have a great exchange after they've found it and they've dispatched the guard that's dealing with it, and you know, Peggy is very much there saying, right, let's call in the SSR. They'll come and we'll get all the glory. You know, we will vindicate ourselves, and so on. And Jarvis moves into this role, which is, he's essentially then forces her to run through how she would deal with the SSR and her colleagues when they arrive. And it's, in a sense, a tough lesson, but friendly advice, you know, in the guise of a tough lesson. And he's doing it from their perspective as men. And in a slight sense, he's kind of saying, look, you may think that they will just come in and say, well done, Peggy, you've solved everything. Howard Stark isn't the big bad that we all think he is. But he's calling her out and saying, that's slightly naive. He doesn't call her naive, and I'm not saying that she is, because she's incredibly smart. But in this case, it's that she is ahead of her time. And so even though it doesn't matter that she's a woman that's done this or how she's done it undercover, they will feel betrayed because A, she's gone behind her back, 2, as well then, because of that social climate, which is that she's also a woman. And he runs it through, and it says they will use it to tear you down, you know. And he comes out with, to clear Mr. Stark's name, you must do it from the shadows. And like, you can see how Peggy is so frustrated by this. Like, you know, do you know the day I've had? Because, you know, she's had to put her reputation on the line previously in order to help Jarvis escape the interview room by pretending that she's an incompetent woman who's all dappy and who doesn't know. And, you know, in a sense, she gets a dressing down in the SSR by Chief Dooley. And this is, you know, a really bad day. And this, for her, is this will vindicate me as an agent, but as a female agent. And Jarvis just, you know, essentially runs her through the scenario. And it says, publicly revealing this info won't clear his name. It'll only place you under suspicion.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the penny drops as she's got to, you know, play the game as he tests Peggy's kind of responses, and that she won't simply be the hero like she was during World War II.
Yeah.
She will be placed under suspicion. That will be used to undermine her. And actually, to do all of this, she needs to still step back and do things from behind the curtain, behind the veil, as it were. Yeah,
absolutely. It's a horrible scene, and another harsh truth for Peggy, that despite the fact that she got up so high in World War II and was so well respected, that regardless of what she does right now, particularly doing something undercover behind the backs of the SSR, won't prove her mettle to them. You know, I think the line she specifically says is, in her frustration, she says, I will call them in and they will respect me. Because she's had such an awful time. Like, you bring up the point that she's played the stupid woman card, I suppose, is what she had to do to get out of it. But it's the reaction of them where they, not only did she have to do that and make this ditzy blonde moment, I suppose would be the old way that you call it, but not only did she do that, the rest of the SSR fundamentally believed that that's what she would do because she's a woman. It wasn't a difficult acting job that she had to do. She just said one thing to them. Oh, I forgot. I picked up this piece of paper, the missing car report, and they instantly look at her and go, oh, well, you would do that because you're a woman. It's a horrible thing for her to have to experience, and she was hoping that by finding all the weapons, she can then reveal herself to be just as good a person at investigations as the rest of the SSR, but there's nothing for her.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the public humiliation of it that Chief Dooley doesn't pull her aside into the office. He does it in front of all the other agents, all the other male agents. And that is the thing that, as well, has her totally frustrated. And it's a really great exchange between these two characters. I mean, firstly, there's the humor, there's the quips and the sarcasm, which is great, and this is the other side of it, the real serious moments where it's almost a heart-to-heart, and here Jarvis is almost playing a tough love kind of game. He's picking at what she's going to say, but in effect it is friendly advice to say, look, I know how these guys are going to respond to this, not because I agree with them, but because I know how they will do it, because I'm a man and I've seen it happen time and time again, and you need to be aware of it. And he's helping her, but it's a kind of a tough love, really.
Yeah, really, and really bitter
but a
pill to
great
swallow.
exchange of dialogue there, really good, really liked it,
Huge props again to the writers of the show. They're doing a great job of just keeping that balance again, not having Peggy crying in the corner. She's definitely getting angry. She definitely would be a role model now. If she was around in our days now, she would be lauded for what she does in this show. But these are challenging times. She's going to battle right through it, definitely. But it leads me on to my next point, which is another fun little moment of the episode. I'm going to go back to Jarvis as well. Great little moment.
Jarvis.
It is. It's just such a great episode for him. You know, we
and then he becomes Ultron.
Yeah. He is the template for Ultron.
Yeah, bad boy. Bad boy.
But I don't know whether his accent played into that at all, but his accent in this episode is fantastic, where he calls in the find at the heartbreak using his American accent. John, do you want to tell us what he said? No, I won't make you do that.
Hey, Mac.
Oh, go on.
I can't do it. Hey, Mac. I've got a hot tip for you.
There you go. That's about as good as Jarvis's accent, but I love how he ends the call with... Have a lovely evening. Which is another wonderful British phrase that does not translate into the broad New York accent he's trying to go for. A fantastic little moment.
No, he just slips back into sort of a polite Englishness. And it's really funny because as well it's just that whole, doing an accent, trying to do an accent is so difficult. I mean, and trying to actually act an accent that is bad is probably just as hard as well, to make sure that, I can put on a good New York or American accent, say.
Yeah. I've heard it. You can.
No, not me. I mean Jarvis. But it's just like the actor who plays him, I mean James Darcy.
Yeah.
He probably can do a really good American accent, but he's having to do a forced kind of slightly stiff upper lip British person trying to do a 1940s, proper New York accent.
Dockworker accent.
Yeah, it's really, really good. That it's that bad, and he manages to do it that bad. Mm-hmm. Then again, maybe he can't, but it's the other way around as well. Just doing a British or even like actors doing Irish accents and so on, so difficult, and the reverse being true. So that's why my accent was dreadful.
It's okay. We won't hold you up to it, John. But yeah, just absolutely love that moment. It's really, really interesting. After Jarvis has talked Peggy down from calling in and ruining her career, he then realizes he has to call it in, and they know his voice, so he has to do the American accent. Just hilarious. Really, really good moment. Nice bit of fun in this episode.
Yeah, definitely.
John, what's your next point?
We find the meaning of the heart and snake symbol.
Yes, we do.
So we were all talking about Leviathan and what's this and what's that, we're trying to think, is it medical, whatever, is it a snake? No, it is actually a heart and a rope, and it's the ensign of the ship, the Heartbreak, where Stark's stash of Stark's stolen stash of the Bad Babies has been taken by Leet Brannis.
The Bad Babies, I like that term as well. All his weapons that he's trying to keep out of the hands of everybody. Yeah,
really there they are in the ship, and Leet Brannis was trying to tell them where he had essentially stashed all these stolen weapons.
Yeah,
and there they are, on a ship moored in the docks at the end of the sewer that they've just crawled through from Stark's house, from underneath Stark's house.
Yeah.
And there it is. So we can sometimes speculate about these symbols and, is it Leviathan? Is it, something to do with something else or whatever? But actually, in this case, it was the ensign for the ship.
For the ship, yeah. And I do like the fact that Leet Brannis did actually give up the location of the of the equipment, essentially.
Yeah.
I'd said last week that if he'd had his working voice box, that was the piece of equipment that unfortunately broke in the fall out of the truck. If he'd had that pushed up against his neck, he probably would have given up any piece of information that Agent Carter wanted before he died. It did look like that's exactly what he did here. He gave up the only thing he could, which was the symbol on the boat. Don't know how she was expected to find it, but at least we know that for some reason Leet Brannis was willing to give up this information.
Yeah, it was really good, and there's a little Easter egg in the name as well, the Heartbreak.
I think so. I just think it's an interesting touch. One of the most famous armors that has been in the Iron Man movie, obviously featuring Tony Stark, the son of Howard, is the Heartbreaker armor. One of the most well known. It's quite a big armor. You'd see it in I think it's Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, one of the earlier ones. But yeah, I just thought it was a nice little touch that the ship here holding all of his father's equipment is the Heartbreak, and that's one of the suits. I'm sure after he ran through a number of names, his suits start to get numbers, so it's just Iron Man suit 41, 42, but some of the early suits he definitely had names for, and the Heartbreaker was one of them. So I just thought it was a nice little touch. Well done again for the writers. Good stuff.
Derek, what's your next point then?
My next one's kind of a big one here. The Ray Krasminski, who we saw a very small amount of in the first 2 episodes. Just kind of the idiot on the SSR that people were making fun of, and a couple of comments from other people about how stupid he was. Just wanted to point out a couple of big things about Ray Krasminski in this episode. He is very central to it, so not a huge shock that he was killed by the end of the episode. It does happen a lot of times when you build up a character at the start. By the end of the episode, they're dead. But I didn't see his murder coming the way it did. But a couple of things about him. Yeah, a couple of things about him. Even though everybody calls him the idiot of the SSR, he is the one that finds the passports in the hotel room at the beginning of the episode. He is the one that finds the reg plate in amongst all the rubble of Roxxon and knows that it's something that needs to be investigated, which I think is very interesting, because without him, there would have been no tracking down of Jarvis. He is the catalyst for the entire episode.
Absolutely.
And also, one other big moment, he's obviously getting his own back on Sousa for the comment that Sousa made that he was the idiot of the department, essentially, because he asks Sousa, is he sweet on Peggy Carter? And then says, you're wasting your time. There's no way she'll give up the stars and stripes for an aluminum crutch, which I think is a horrible put down.
Really harsh.
For poor Sousa. Not a nice guy, I will say, definitely Ray Krasminski, but I do like some of the little touches that they did to build out the character throughout this episode.
Yeah, and of course, remember, he is essentially being given a huge piece of information by the hired thug who has been taken in after Jarvis has done the anonymous tip-off, who is someone who I'll talk about in my next point, but he's a hired guard, he's in a fight with Peggy, but he is essentially saying about the English broad, she's good in a fight, and so on. Mm-hmm. Krasminski is essentially starting to learn here, as he's driving this guy back for interview, that there is an English woman who is handy in a fight.
Yeah.
It's connected to the Starks. He probably would put 2 and 2 together and make 4 and come to the conclusion that it is Peggy Carter.
Yeah.
So he's been given a huge amount of information here. And the big wow moment, which is Krasminski's death at the hands of then this unknown menace, this unknown person who is there watching the SSR offload all of Stark's tech and so on. And I thought that was I thought that was really like a big end scene, really, and not just because of Krasminski's death, but it has huge ramifications then through the SSR, and
Absolutely.
it's what it does it to his colleagues. I don't know whether he has any friends in the SSR as such, but even people like Peggy, who shouldn't like him. I mean, he's cheating on his wife.
Yeah.
He's got a girlfriend, but even Peggy says to Angie, I think, right at the end, someone died in my work today. I didn't get on with him. I don't know whether I liked him, but he was good at his job.
Yeah.
He was, and it's in contrast to Sousa obviously saying to him, "You're the idiot of the office."
Yeah.
Playing up to that fact maybe that he was doing that. She was saying he was actually good at his job.
Yeah.
And despite everything that should keep them apart, she is still sad that he's obviously being killed.
Yeah, like Peggy says, he's a brute, he's a cheat and disrespectful, but good at his job. And I like another great reaction from Sousa here, who reacts as if he's back at war. It's reminded him that essentially life is precious. It's reminded him that once you're in the trenches with other people, any time someone could be taken out. It's just bringing him back to again the fact that he is someone that survived a war and has had to pay a price for that.
You're on the same side, and you might not always get on with everyone on the same side, let alone the people you're fighting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. He also blames the person that rang in the tip. So unbeknownst to him, he's blaming Jarvis for the death of Krasminski. If it hadn't been him that called in the tip, they wouldn't have been sent down in the middle of the night. It wouldn't have been Krasminski that was killed, essentially. Chief Dooley continues to blame Howard Stark, and now has a very personal reason for that. One of his men were killed in the pursuit of Howard Stark's tech. If he just could have kept it under wraps, his men wouldn't be involved, and now one of them wouldn't be dead.
Yeah, it's a proper vendetta now beginning to build from Chief Dooley, and I really like that because it's vicious. Yeah. I mean, it's personal, as you say, but that's the other great sort of the shockwave of that death is that it just rippled out to the other members of the SSR.
Yeah.
In different ways, and I thought that was a really, really good way of doing it, because it could quite easily have just finished with both Krasminski and the hired thug that he was taking in for questioning being shot and end credits.
Yeah.
And I like that they showed the aftermath of how it affected these people involved in a covert operation, because if they do tell people like Peggy does to Angie, she has to make up a story about it. Yeah. It's not the actual truth. She's honest, but it's not the truth. And I believe that's the same kind of phrasing that Jarvis said down in the sewer, that he always tells Anna, he's always honest to Anna, he doesn't necessarily tell her the full truth.
Yeah.
So a really nice little link in there, I think, as well. Definitely.
Absolutely. So with Krasminski, we hardly knew him, but sad loss for the SSR, considering how good he was at his job. John, do you want to give us your final point?
Yeah, my final point is the fight between the heavy, the thug, in on the ship, on the Heartbreak.
Yes, Jerome.
With Peggy Carter.
Mm-hmm.
Jerome. Yeah, really, really liked it. It showed Peggy as being smart, it's tough, physical. Really, really liked it. I love the fact that Jarvis comes in. He's no fighter.
Absolutely.
Is essentially up against the hull of the ship, being strangled to death, and we get to see the constrictor. I mean, something that, to be perfectly honest, I thought he was going to soil his pants. If it relaxes every muscle in the body, this was kind of almost like an Eric Cartman moment. That unfortunately everything was going to flush out, as it were. But it was really, really good. And I mean, it just felt like a Cluedo moment as well. It was like Peggy Carter in the Heartbreak ship with the lead pipe as she, after using the constrictor, because it's like, there goes the lead pipe. I mean, that was a good kick up from the floor.
Absolutely.
And a whack. I mean, I'm surprised he was still alive to be taken into questioning after it, but it was a really good fight scene. And obviously it was prefaced by the threat from Jerome that I don't mind taking out a woman.
Yeah.
You know, I've got no qualms about killing a woman. So it was tough, it was rough,
Yeah.
and Peggy came up to the surface and like the cream at the top of the milk, really good.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you may say Jarvis is bad in a fight, but great thing for him is that he is a great distraction if somebody's attacking Peggy. So without his distraction,
That's true.
she may not have survived. Definitely loved this scene. It really reminded me of the scene towards the end of season 2 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. where Fitz comes in and smacks someone over the head with an iron bar, and with the "Welcome to Science" bitch, or "This is Science" bitch. That one.
Yeah.
She needs to work on her action hero one-liners, I think, maybe. But I don't think it's a British thing to do, though. I don't know. But no, really enjoyed
Well, the lead
that.
pipe is.
Yes, certainly is. Might be getting a lead pipe to the head in a minute, listeners, if I don't start calming down. But no, an excellent scene. Really, really good.
Yeah, so Derek, what's your final point?
My final point is Angie and Peggy. Great little
Yeah.
moment at the end of it. You did mention it a bit, so I'm not gonna say too much about it, but I really do like that it's, you know, they have the little moment earlier on in the episode where Angie comes in to visit Peggy after a really sad day, or a really poor day for her. We never find out what the reason for her bad day was. We presume it's not as bad as the kind of days Peggy's been having recently. But she essentially comes in and says, you know, I've got a bottle of peach schnapps and some rhubarb tart. What's
Rhubarb tart.
What's
Rhubarb.
tart?
What a combination. Winning combination of rhubarb tart and schnapps.
Blueberry tart as well. That's what I was confusing it with. But yeah, a bottle of schnapps and some rhubarb.
Rhubarb tart. It's a new fruit that's been invented on Defenders TV
Yes,
podcast.
it has. Yes,
It was a nice combination. I wonder if it would peach schnapps with rhubarb tart. Be lovely.
Yes, peach schnapps and rhubarb tart. See which one makes us sick first is essentially the challenge. But Peggy dismisses her, sends her out of the room, but Peggy does go straight to her when she's had her awful day after losing a member of the team, and obviously having that pressure of essentially showing herself off as a just a stupid woman again in front of the SSR, which she absolutely didn't want to do. And yeah, nice little moment between the two of them. It's nice to know that Peggy has a friend that's outside of the system, essentially.
Yeah, I thought this was a nice little moment between the two, and I thought it was that realization from Peggy of the importance of, friends, as you say, outside the SSR, but also her colleagues, even if they are a bit broody and not necessarily someone you would socialize with. Just the importance of, human connection and close connection, not just isolating herself off from the world, which I think, again, has been triggered from what Jarvis and her talked about in the previous episode, where, he essentially said to her, you can't go down this road on your own. Mm-hmm. Everyone needs help. You help Captain America. I'm here to help you. So I think the seeds have been sown and she realises that. And I think that's a nice bit of continuity as well for those characters. Yeah, really, really good.
Definitely. So that concludes the top 5 for the episode. John, do you have any particular notes about this episode?
The only note that I have is the introduction of Molly's replacement at the Griffith Hotel, which was Dorothy Underwood, the new tenant. Just because she was introduced, I was like, is she important?
Yeah.
She's from Iowa, but she could easly be from Hydra, potentially. That's nothing against anyone from Iowa. And, of course, that she was called Dottie. Or we could call her Dowie.
Yes, we could.
Another nickname for Dorothy.
Yeah.
Of course, that's my mum's name. So Dorothy, Dowie, Dottie. She prefers Dowie. Bizarrely, not Dottie.
I would never call her Dowie.
No, neither do I. I call her mum. Yeah. But it's like, literally, is Dorothy Underwood Molly's replacement, or is it something else, something bigger, a ruse of some kind? Just the fact that she was introduced, I immediately went, interesting. So, it is an interesting introduction. It could just be the neighbour.
Yeah, possibly, yeah.
Or something else.
Yeah, I definitely felt there's the indication again, as I mentioned earlier on, this is an institute that's been going on for many, many years. Mentions of Houdini performing there, which is 20 or 30 years prior to this time. There's clearly women in waiting looking to get rooms in there. So Dorothy is the new addition to
Griffith Hotel.
To Griffith Hotel, yeah. So I'm interested. Yeah, let's see how the cast of characters in the Griffith are coming along. I think it would be a great sitcom based in there as well. If all the crime is cleared up in America, you could have a great sitcom based in the Griffith Hotel as well. So particularly with Dorothy, who seems to be not very knowledgeable about the ways of the world by the sounds of things. Young Iowa girl coming up to make it big in ballet in New York. So let's see how that plays out in the next couple of episodes.
Absolutely. So Derek, do you have any notes?
Yeah, a couple of notes actually. One big one that I left out of my points for some reason was the investigation into Leet Brannis. They find out that he's been dead for 2 years. That essentially Leet Brannis died in a particular battle. Which hopefully we'll find out more about in the next couple of episodes. It is quite a big point. That investigation's going on into this really strange character, the Leet Brannis, the man who had his voice box removed, essentially, which is why he had the 3-point incision in his throat, isn't it?
And they find out that the amalgam in his teeth was Russian. And we also find out that Agent Thompson has a friend in Moscow.
That's right.
Is that important? I wonder.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe Agent Thompson's on the turn as well, but you never know. But yeah, I just thought that was an interesting point as well. One big one for me, because I love Easter eggs, so I was really excited by this one.
I do.
Every time, chocolate Easter egg. Every time. But yeah, I loved the passports little nod. So when Krasinski finds the passports in the hotel room of the Quiet Man, he mentions that there are 6 passports in there: 2 for Britain, 2 for America, and 2 Italian passports. And when he reads out the names of them, Chief Dooley says, obviously a movie fan, which got me thinking, what are those names? Okay, so just in case you missed them, because I missed all of them, I got some of them and missed the full set. So the British passports were, the name was Alfred Lean, which is a reference to Alfred Hitchcock and David Lean, 2 very famous directors from around that time. The American passports were Orson and Hawks, which are Orson Welles, very famous director, and Howard Hawks.
Howard Hawks, yeah.
2 very famous characters around that time. And then the Italian passports were Federico Rossellini. Now that's Federico Fellini and Roberto Rossellini. So 2 Italian directors, which I thought was a really nice touch, a nice little seeding
really good,
in.
Really good little touch.
And very famous as well at the time, so obviously Dooley would catch that very quickly. He's an investigator. But it was almost instantly, once he got the connections, it was like he was doing a crossword. He caught them instantly. Really, really interesting touch.
Yeah, really nice.
That's my notes for this week. To sum up, John, do you defend this episode of Agent Carter?
I do defend this episode of Agent Carter. I think, like last week, it was a really solid, really good episode. Again, I think for me, the big aspect of this was Jarvis and Peggy's relationship really deepening, really developing, both in terms of how they interact and talk to one another, and also with the humour. Obviously, the big wow of Krasinski being killed and taken out. I would give this 4 lead pipes smashing across a temple out of 5.
Very good, very good.
But I really, really enjoyed it. Just a nice progression on from the last episode. And again, more intrigue. It is a spy and an espionage based. So it's great to have a new man in the shadows watching over the SSR, that new person there watching and waiting, and who ultimately dispatched Krasinski.
Very interesting that you say it like that.
What?
Because I definitely think that shadow looked like a woman.
Oh, well, maybe.
Dressed in the dark. I definitely had the feeling that there was some way about the movement of her when she comes in.
Okay.
I'm going to say female, but some way about the way she moved and shot the 2 characters in the car that made me think it was a woman.
Yeah, maybe. So I really liked this episode. I thought it was great. Another solid one. And I mean, the standout for me was, again, the exchange between Edwin Jarvis and Peggy Carter, and this time him giving her more advice on, in a sense, the poor realities of that world at that time, even though he doesn't agree with them. So really good, and again, the nice Romeo and Juliet, or the the Sharks and the Jets reference there at the start. Loved. Really nice opening.
Yeah, yeah.
Derek, do you defend this episode of Agent Carter?
I do defend this episode. Definitely the second time I watched this episode, I liked it a lot more. It is a lot more deliberately paced, I think I'd like to say, than the first two episodes. In the US, the first two episodes are broadcast back to back, like a 1 hour, 2 hour long featurette or feature, I suppose.
Okay, yeah.
And this was the second episode that was broadcast. Over here, we had 3 episodes in a row, so you would kind of get the feeling from the first 2 episodes it's going to be an action-packed TV show. This episode isn't as action-packed. There was a lot more character moments in here. Watching it with ad breaks, I suppose, you can tell, two of the sections of the show were quite slow in a way, or quite deliberately paced, as I said. But really are building on characters quite well. I wouldn't lose a moment from the episode. Hearing other people ask Peggy, is she married, and her saying, no, I'm married to the job. Really nice touches like that, where you're getting much more knowledge about this era of history in America, which I don't know much about. I've always seen war movies and people coming home from war as always from the male perspective, and seeing it from the female perspective is really well written. And it's a Marvel show. I didn't expect it from a Marvel show to be this, I suppose, this well put together. I've never been let down. As I said, I'm the huge Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fan here. I've never been let down. And the more shows I see from the Marvel Studios, they're doing a brilliant job. I think Jeff Loeb is the one that runs the studio, and he's really guiding these shows into becoming really good representations of their eras and of their setups and of their overall storyline. I'm really enjoying them.
Yeah, I mean, just picking up on that point about, seeing it from the woman's perspective, it is that whole aspect, and something I really, really like, whether it's in books, comics, film. I love that kind of whole period of like the 20s, 30s, and 40s where you have such rapid social change. It's a cultural shift to an extent. The women get the vote. There's all this type of thing. Moving on from the suffragettes, then the war comes and they get put into positions of manufacturing, of administration, of power, and it's really good to see that. And then there's almost like a collective forgetfulness, and all that seems to be forgotten, and it's like they're supposed to take up these menial tasks or be spoken to like second-class citizens. Absolutely. And they're not going to stand for it, and it's that next stage of that social change. And I love that kind of dynamic, and I love that being explored, written about, shown on TV. It's really, really good, and that's part of the thing that I find fascinating with Agent Carter. I mean, I just recall like my gran in the World War II, like raising money, heading up to raise money in order to donate to build more fighter planes.
Yeah,
things like that were being done for the war effort in that sense, to protect the UK from essentially Nazi Germany coming in. Like, it's really interesting to hear that she did that. I mean, she didn't work in the industries, but it was taking on this role of raising money to help with building planes.
Yeah,
amazing.
The war effort. Yeah. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. I'm really hoping that some of the writers that are on this show and some of the people that are guiding the Peggy Carter character, I'm hoping they're going to be taken on board for shows like Jessica Jones, for Daredevil Season 2, where we did say that the female characters within the first season of Daredevil weren't the strongest elements of the show. We did love the show, as you know, if you've heard our podcasts. We absolutely loved the show.
Absolutely.
But hopefully we can have this group of writers who've done such a good job can transition over and start working on those other shows and hopefully give a bit more depth to those characters. I have no doubt, after reading the comic books and no doubt after watching the Marvel TV shows, that Jessica Jones is going to be a fantastic show, and hopefully they can give her some semblance of depth that they've been able to put into Agent Carter. Really, really enjoying the show so far.
Absolutely. I think on that note, it's to say that we will be back next week following Agent Carter. on Fox UK on the Sunday. We'll be back with another podcast. And of course, please listen to us. Send in your thoughts or comments. You can listen to us at www.defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes, and you can search on any other good podcast catcher for Defenders TV Podcast. Send in your feedback, send in your comments, your thoughts, any stories about the show,
any stories
whatsoever, exactly, to feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com. Again, we will see you in a week's time.
Yes, for the fantastically named the Blitzkrieg button. Oh, fantastic.
Nice.
Really excited. And with that, just one little thing to say, John. Shut up, English. You speak too much anyway.
Whatever, Irish. Bye.